Okay, guess we're recording. First time we're using Riverside. So hopefully it works out well.
Riverside, Riverdale, Archie Comics. So you told me, that I want a little update, quick update on your hedging, happiness of hedging bet, your happiness hedge. And it sounded like you had some technical issues that sort of worked out in your favor anyways.
Yeah, so the hedging happiness worked out. The hedge worked out well, which was not happy. Oilers went down 3-0. I won money on each of those 3 games, so to say.
And you were letting it ride, right? You were just like rolling over the winnings, right?
Yeah, $75 turned into 200 or so, and then basically $75 turned into a little over $500 through those 3 games.
Okay.
And
try to get those in the market.
Well, then on game, was it game 4? Yeah, game 4, I tried to bet the $500, all of it on Florida. Because if we were going to get swept, I wanted to be happy. I wanted to have $1,000 in my jean pocket here. But the app wouldn't let me for some reason. It just kept giving me an error code, and I couldn't put the $500 in. So I attempted it a couple of times on different days, and then I just gave up and I took it out. And I did something that probably very, very few people do with the sports betting apps. I actually transferred money from the app to my bank account. Because I bet you 90% of people that use those apps, they just gamble that money away on other things. You can play blackjack on there if you want, if you have some money on it. But transferred the money, went right into my bank account a couple of days later. Thank you, Play Alberta. And the Oilers won the next 2 games. And it is Thursday, June 20th, as we record this. What the future holds, we do not know. I will say that I still have one hedge out there. Originally, when I got that free play, that was the thing I got for selling 50-50. I put the $25 free play on Panthers in 7. So I thought the worst possible outcome is we make it to game 7 and lose. The same way we did against Carolina, the way Vancouver did against Boston, although I was really happy about that outcome. So if that heartbreak happens, my $25, I think, multiplies by 6. So at least I get something. So the big thing is that we win tomorrow's game, which by the time this podcast publishes, the finals will be over. And man, it'll be, who knows?
Who knows? The 50-50, I couldn't believe the number. Was it like almost over $16 million? Almost $17 million for game 4?
Yeah. I just can't imagine what it's like for the people selling in the arena. Plus, you got all the online purchases. Online purchases, I think, are the vast majority of the purchases. But still, in the arena, when I was doing the in each of the games I did, one against the Canucks in their series and one against Dallas, I think I sold about $4,000 worth just as one person. If you think about back in the day when 50-50 was just some guy with they were taking cash and they were printing out tickets, giving you an arm's length of tickets or whatever.
Yep.
Back in those days, I think they did like 75,000 on a good night total. So if you think about it, there were about 50 people, 50 volunteers selling tickets around the arena. And I think they all did $3,000 to $5,000 because, I mean, there was no bad area to be selling those things. Everybody was buying them.
My son asked me as we were watching on TV, "You should buy a ticket." And I said, no, I'm not going to.
I stayed out of it this time because of all that money. I figured I was going to lose $75 per Oilers win. So
yeah. Okay. Well, semi-happy ending, at least for the midpoint, right? We'll see what happens with the actual hockey itself. So, all right. Wow. Okay. Thanks for the update on that. It is a summer solstice, yeah. But there's always news. The news fairy always comes out with things. There was a big takeover announcement that happened in the world that we sort of live in, Marcus, right?
Yeah, big news for Edmonton publicly traded companies, of which we have so few significant ones. I mean, you've got all those companies in Calgary, all the oil companies and all that. We have, many. I mean, really, now we just have Stantec, right?
Yep, in the Edmonton Journal, they used to have like an Edmonton index. It was just a little chart or in the newspaper in the business section, and it would be names, like oh boy, like Isotechnica. I remember that was there.
I remember all those names.
Yeah. So years ago, right? Stantec. Still
in my
around.
My first job in this industry, kind of an internship when I was in university, was with another small brokerage called Union Securities. They're not around anymore. They haven't been for many years. And for lack of any other direction of what to do on that job, I just basically was given a, be a research guy type of position, minimum wage. I started a newsletter in the branch. I called it Yeg Biz, and I was using that Yeg term way before everybody else was. And in it, I did an Edmindex. So basically, I did this like a 4-page newsletter weekly, just discussing publicly traded companies in Edmonton with a listing of all the ones that there were. Mostly, there were a couple of mining companies and mostly biotechs. And the significant ones were Stantec, Canadian Western Bank, which we'll talk about in a second here. And I forget who else. There were not really many major ones.
McCoy Bros.
McCoy Bros were in there, yeah. And Atco, it's kind of Calgary based, isn't it? I don't know. But yeah,
Did you throw Enbridge in there too?
No, Enbridge was not in there. Enbridge, I think, was Calgary based. It was it was a cap weighted index I created on Excel and tracked that and sort of did little features on different companies in Edmonton. And CWB was one of them when I did that.
Westame, Sheridan Westame. Westame would have been a good one.
Westame? Remember that one.
I'll bring that up in one story in one episode in the future. Yeah.
Maybe that was after or before. This was 2003 when I did this.
Fort Sask. I mean, anyway, nevertheless.
Sheridan was in there, yeah. Was in the list. Okay. Edmonton area, I considered. So yeah, CWB, I mean, pretty significant bank. Small bank, obviously, when you compare it to the big majors. Big banks in Canada, they're 50 to over $100 billion market cap nationwide. CWB was a nice little Western Canadian story, Edmonton headquartered. A decent branch network in the West. A couple of branches here and
39 branches, apparently.
39, yeah. Obviously not quite as much as the majors.
39 branches of TD are probably just in Edmonton, or even more,
in Edmonton alone, yeah. We have 2 or 3 in Sherwood Park. So yeah, and I think I was always wondering, and I always was hoping that CWB at some point would merge with another bank like Laurentian, who has mostly an Eastern footprint and no banking exposure in the West. They have insurance and other stuff. And then maybe sort of create a nationwide alternative bank to the Big Six. And Big Six, we out West don't usually say Big Six. We might start saying that more now because National Bank took over Canadian Western Bank. And National Bank, what they were really missing to basically not be considered a Big Six, National Bank really has almost no presence in the West. They have one branch in the Ice District. They've got, I think, 2 branches in Calgary, right?
One's on Stephen Avenue. Yeah, it's a notable. Yep. If you're walking down Stephen Ave, you'll see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe 2 in Vancouver, none in Saskatchewan, or maybe 1 in, I think they have 1 in Regina, but not Saskatoon. So National Bank, I think, wanting to have a little bit of a presence in the West, took over, or basically has made a takeover offer, not a hostile one at all, but a takeover offer for CWB at a pretty good price. I mean, at pretty much double the stock price where it was trading at that day, the announcement. And with it, they increased, I think I looked at it, they increased from 3 branches in Alberta to 16 branches total in Alberta. I was just looking at Alberta when I looked at those numbers. So there's 13 CWB branches in Alberta. And then CWB also 14? Has branches across, Oh, you have your notes there too, eh?
Alberta, 3 plus 14, BC, 3 plus 16, Saskatchewan, 1 plus 4, Manitoba, 1 plus 1.
Yeah, and actually was surprised CWB has a pretty good presence in BC, all over BC, in the interior as well as Vancouver.
So, I suppose, folks, especially in the interior, I would suspect like in Kelowna and Fernie and places like that, Cranbrook, where, whether they're on Western time zone or just have a large, community of Albertans or part-time or full-time former Albertans, right? I can see that happening a little bit there. Right? It's, Big Six now, and this is going to take a long time, right? This is going to be like a year and a half before this, all the regulators review it and it gets approved. So they're not expecting this transaction to close until the end of 2020 or, Q3, Q4 2025. And I think it goes to the point, like, yes, there is just further top-heavy consolidation of the financial, of the banking business here in Canada. When I think about it, so whether that's good or bad, or that's just the way it is a very different thing in the United States, where there is a lot more, hundreds, if not thousands of regional banks. But when I think about region, in Alberta, now that, CWB is effectively going to be 1/10 pro forma of the new combined company, right? And anytime there's a takeover, one culture has to take over. I saw that with Suncor, Petro-Canada. They usually encourage this, right? Like it's merger of equal. This is certainly not a merger of equals in any sense, right?
No.
And and so I'm curious to see what it will look like. What the fully new brand will be, how they will maintain. They say they will keep a Western headquarters, but if you're looking to save, like they said, I was looking at the investor deck when they were raising the financing, the money for this. They're saying, $270 million in annual savings in synergies, as they say, right, by year three. $270 million is a lot of people. And when one is 90% of the new company, right, you can suspect that there's going to be some changes on the company that's being acquired. Well, undoubtedly, there will still be an office or a Western headquarters or whatever they want to call it in Edmonton. But I suspect that there's going to be some changes people-wise, right?
And I think
other things too.
I think the headline or the news article about it said there would be no downside in the West. There'd be a Western presence, whatever. But then the same article says, they're going to have these savings due to integration. So here's an interesting how this affects us. Obviously, we know everyone out here knows people that work with Canadian Western Bank. And so how are they going to deal with the culture? That's to be seen. You mentioned culture, and I think culture-wise, I was part of TD Canada Trust in the years shortly following the TD takeover of Canada Trust. There was some culture mishmash there, but you'd have, like, I worked in an old Canada Trust branch. I dealt with customers who've been customers with Canada Trust for many, many years. And there was a sort of a culture that did continue. The naming stayed TD Canada Trust for many years. And I think that ultimately went well. Nowadays, a lot of the old school employees from the Canada Trust days have moved on. The customers have accepted the big green logo, and they've now mostly rebranded to just TD. But it's not as big of a culture difference as I think you might see with this CWB National Bank. I mean, for one, National Bank is Quebec-based and probably very French with their internal communications. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if all their emails come in French first. It'll be an interesting one to see and what they do. Do they come up with a new brand entirely, or do they just rebrand everything black and red National Bank? It's interesting that Canadian Western Bank for the last little while has been marketing themselves as different than the major banks. They've been marketing this different color. They're teal green, those commercials with the different color balls. Yeah, we're not red, we're not blue. But yeah, what I was also going to say, the interesting thing, I'll tilt my camera here a little bit in case this does go on YouTube. You see some moving boxes over there. My desk is still pretty messy. We're kind of a little part of this too, and there's a little bit of uncertainty because before all this happened, Canadian Western Bank made the decision to move their headquarters from their old building on 103rd Street into Manulife Place, taking up the first 10 stories, pushing us up to the 28th story where we've got a nice new office. Maybe if I'm allowed, I'll put a picture of the still work in progress on our blog post. Obviously that's still happening, but is Canadian Western Bank / National Bank going to use up all these floors in Manulife Place, or does Manulife Place become National Bank Place? The naming was supposed to change of the building, remember? And will they actually have all that real estate sold or rented out to the eventual Western National Bank, whatever it happens to be? Or we go back to not having huge vacancy rates still in this building and having zero retail and almost zero retail on the first 2 stories.
I mean, one of the commitments that National Bank said they would do is that they would double the community investment that CWB has currently. And so, I imagine, they'll come in with a splash, a lot of, big PR campaign, new sponsorships, things of that nature, familiarize the name and the brand to Western Canada, where it'd be very much more familiar, in Ontario, particularly also in Quebec. Right. But yes, I can see them doing that. And maybe, they do that in terms of in other forms as well. Right. And having a presence, being able in a lot of ways, whether it's, in the building, the naming, what other conventions that they might look into. So, it's a year and a half away, but it's something that happens. It's been a trend. I mean, here again in Alberta, a Service, right, credit union, and also Connect First, formalize their merger. And that's a little bit more, I mean, still not quite merger of equals, but it's still, they've combined. They're going to try to figure out what their new name is going to be. And then, yeah, to your point about Laurentian and the kind of this, ugly duckling over in Quebec that people have looked over umpteen times and haven't done anything, maybe look to consolidate with. But it makes me wonder what other consolidation things may occur. Maybe, if we think Alberta centric, the one major, gorilla sort of in the room, if I can use that term, is ATB. All right, ATB
that's another one I've always thought about is, what if the provincial government spun out ATB and had them merge with CWB and have a more significant bank with a bit more of a network? Mm-hmm. And I brought up Laurentian just because they were in the news not too long ago that they were trying to sort of set themselves up to be taken over. Was there any information about a certain company taking them over?
No, just like I think it was looked at. They had a strategic plan, strategic plan initiative, and then nothing came about of it, right? And so it fell through. But Equitable is out there now. There's a lot of other credit unions. We have seen now ATB move into Kelowna and Saskatchewan to kind of follow that Alberta influence, right? Whether it was people from Saskatchewan coming to Alberta and then going back, or people from Alberta looking to, again, spend part of their time or all their time in BC. ATB starting to branch outside of Alberta. And if they have plans for that, I'd be curious to see, obviously, potential that might look like down the road. But I mean, RBC and HSBC, that's been done. And so there's not a lot of names left. But of the names that are left, there's probably be some more activity that occurs, right? There's lots of large credit unions in Ontario and in BC that probably could, if they're looking for sustainability or longer term growth and whatnot, they're probably going to have to look at similar sort of initiatives as well. So TBD, but I know it makes an impact in Edmonton.
They all have to merge or something, right? There is no sustainability for small regional banks, unfortunately. It'd be nice if there was, but
Canada seems to be a country very much. I mean, whatever geography, economy, what have you, right? But we seem very comfortable with oligopolies in various industries, whether it's finance, pipelines, energy, grocery stores, what have you, anything. It ends up being an oligopoly. Never a monopoly, mostly, usually, but often an oligopoly. So TBD. One concept I will bring up in this situation, just for fun, is that there is a concept in the investment world called merger arbitrage. And merger arbitrage is it's a fairly effective way to arbitrage a deal. Right. So in this case, you have National Bank that's doing an all-share transaction. They're going to give 0.45 shares of National Bank for every single share of Canadian Western Bank that's out there. They're not paying in cash. They're doing it all in paper. And if you were to look at the current share price of National Bank, it's at $107 approximately. So if you do a 0.45% of that, you're looking at about $48 and change. Whereas a single share of Canadian Western Bank is at $42 and change. So there's a difference of about $6 between what the offer price is going to be, ultimately at the end of, sometime the end of next year versus today. And, that's a pretty big gap for, and because why? There's timing, right? There's timing involved. It takes a year and a half. You have to take in consideration time value of money. You also have to take into the consideration that because it's a share transaction, all paper transaction, Canadian Western Bank effectively now is going to fluctuate up and down, in correlation to the share price of National Bank. And then also, there's regulatory uncertainty. We're talking oligopolies here. The Competition Bureau, the financial institution, they're going to take a look and see if there's anything that says, okay, you're going to be a little bit too concentrated over here. And, you might have to look at doing something else over here. So there's uncertainty and it will take time. So there's a little bit of value attributed to that uncertainty. But this is a situation where you're looking at like a 14% difference between what the share price ratio, the value of what it would be now versus what the current share price is of Canadian Western Bank. And, you can go short National and go long Canadian Western beforehand, right? Or you can, buy the subscription receipts. But long story short, this concept of merger arbitrage occurs when things like this happen, when transactions like this occur. And there are PMs out there that will explicitly only look for these sort of deals and then do their math and take their experience and say, what are the odds of this actually passing or not? Because should it not actually occur, you can see the share price of Canadian Western plummet by almost half to what it was beforehand, right? So it's just an interesting concept that I'm I like reading about and understanding about.
It's another reminder that it's an efficient market. It always is.
Yes.
And that difference, as you say, that is the slight chance that the deal doesn't go through exactly as presented. I think the odds are very, very extremely low for there to be a regulatory issue here, especially given that they just allowed RBC to take over HSBC, which I think was a slap in the face too, really. The spirit of those regulations, letting the biggest bank take over a fairly decent-sized small bank, and it would have been okay if maybe they let one of the smaller 3 of the big 5 take them over, or maybe even National Bank. But yeah, anyways, that arbitrage, then what that does, if say the odds really improve of the deal going through exactly at a certain price, the arbitrageurs come in and they bid up that price of CWB, or they bid down price of National, and they come closer.
That's right.
And it's their activity that makes that market so efficient and brings those prices closer together. And we've seen a lot of different takeovers, and sometimes, and a good example, I think some years back, right before the pandemic started, when was Cineplex was supposed to be taken over by I forget what it was again.
Cineworld, yeah. And that didn't
suddenly
go through.
The pandemic completely changed the metrics around, and suddenly the price did not look like the price that was being offered by Cineworld for Cineplex. And there's a reason.
Yeah, that's right. Ultimately, Rogers, completed their transaction of Shaw. And, if I think about another major one, Microsoft, was successful with their Activision Blizzard, and all of those had multiple regulatory, or, here in the United States and overseas, and in the former, in the latter, I should say. And then with Roger Shaw, with communications, right, that took a long time, but eventually did go through. So in that uncertainty, people will look to just kind of take the certainty of the current price and leave. And there's others who will come into the void to kind of, like you said, capture that difference and make the pricing a little bit more efficient over time. So anyway, interesting concept that's out there. Happy to chat about more in the future, specifically if someone's interested in it.
We'll see what happens. I look forward to seeing what this building gets named. Or if we get a CWB branch in the main levels, because that was the plan too. There'd be a CWB branch down there, but now the National Bank branch is just 2 blocks north. I don't know why they would put a branch in our building. But anyways, moving on from there, you're telling me an interesting story about your son is selling some kind of drinks in school.
I don't know how much I should speak about this. I guess it's over because school's almost over, if not already by the time this is released.
He's not supposed to, or what?
No. There's schoolyard economics happening all the time. Trouble? You can be trading snacks. It could be just a bartering system, right? But long story short is that another student was selling candy, and kids will sometimes bring cash to school because there's a concession, and they'll buy popcorn or what have you. And so usually some kids will have a few dollars with them. And so there was somebody who was selling candy, and my son saw that, and he thought he'd take a chance, or take a look and see if he can get involved into that as well. So we went and bought a flat of a beverage, of a popular beverage that's or I should say popular, that's been influenced online, and using the Costco pricing, you buy it in volume, and you can kind of sell it, at a price that the students will actually, or other kids will actually pay for. And so long story short, he made a few dollars. Nothing crazy, but like he made 20, 30 something dollars doing this. And what it did was it provided an opportunity to kind of talk about the differences between revenue and expenses, and what's why revenue is different from earnings, right? Accounts payable. Somebody didn't have a toonie with them that day and said, "Hey, can I pay you tomorrow?" And then trying to recover and actually get that money, coming in, right? And also interest, but there was no interest charged because Dad actually used his credit card to go buy the flat of beverage at Costco. But yeah, I made him do the math. Okay, here's 18 of these bottles in a flat. If
he
you're
was
charging
making a margin.
X amount of dollars, what's your total revenue expectation? This is how much it cost, plus GST, plus the bottle deposit. This is what you're, divide that by how many bottles, what would that be? And then what do you think your margin's going to be? Right. So it was a fun exercise for him because he made a few dollars, but for me too, just to bring in some financial concepts. I don't know. Again, school's over now, right? I don't know if this will occur again in the new year. right? But you also, well, I know that in the Pokemon economy, people were getting unfairly, the trades weren't happening equitably early on, and so kids were getting taken advantage of. So they, the school said, and they said, yeah, no more Pokemon, no more Pokemon. But I think as long as you're respectful and there's reasonable, pricing, and it's, clean, it's going to happens in all the schoolyards, right? So another kid started trying to sell rocks, geodes, but that price point was much higher, and I don't think he
put some googly eyes on them.
That rocks, yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting how early some kids can catch attention to this or show interest in this, and not wanting to knock it, right? I'm like, yeah, I'll embrace it, and let's teach a couple math lessons, teach a couple business lessons, and who knows what this might sprout down the road, right? But it was a fun little 1.5 week sort of venture in beverage selling. You see kids selling lemonade on the sides of the streets, right? I saw a couple kids in the neighborhood selling it to some people doing some renos on a house, right? So it's out there, right?
Quite entrepreneurial.
I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. So
I don't think I ever did anything. Yeah, eventually. Well, his money raising has come to an end, I think, because he's been raising money for the last couple of years to buy this game table. It's kind of like a video game table thing where you can play chess and all sorts of games on it. Or if you've ever seen one of these, it's like $1,000. So it took him years to raise this money, of course, with a lot of help from parents, grandparents, and uncle. And I've been giving him all my bottles. So, every time those kids raising money for some sports team or whatever other good cause are coming by to ask for my bottles, I tell them no. I'm giving them to my nephew so he can buy a video game thing with him. Yeah. And now I have a new bag full of bottles in my pantry, and I messaged him asking him, do you want these? Are you still collecting these for me? Do you still want them? Yeah. No interest, I don't think, because he's got his money. He's got his game table. He doesn't need to raise money anymore.
Until the next thing.
I was going to say that impresses me what your son's doing. I never did anything like that when I was young. Did you ever have any entrepreneurial pursuits in elementary school or junior high?
Not quite like that. I had a friend. I have a very close friend who was quite into that. He would mod PlayStations. He would chip them so that you could then. And I think he made some good coin doing that at the time. He would burn games onto a CD. Right. And then, and then sell, give those games. But then you needed to have the appropriate modification on the console in order to actually be able to read it. Right. So then he would go do that. But I remember even back in elementary around that time, a couple of the more innovative things that this was not in elementary. This was later on. But I remember even back in elementary, he had an eye for that. I think that came from his father. But yeah, he had a couple of ventures in elementary, like a little fan on a hat. I remember distinctly that you could like flick a switch on and it could cool you down, right? But I remember him making some money doing some PlayStation mods. So, but I never, and it didn't get into. I didn't get into it as much. No, not quite like that. But I did get the investment bug, in probably around high school. Right, I was never part of the investment club or accounting club in high school, but I was reading it. Like again, in elementary, junior high, I was reading the business section. I was reading newspaper cover to cover. So I read business, I learn about this stuff. I'd see, charts or like the FX rate, and I'd see the Edmonton, index as we talked about.
I think Edmindex is a better name.
And so I guess that's where one of the early seeds of investing in particular came in, and kind of ends up turning into what you and I are doing now. Right?
Yeah, I know the time, obviously, when you were in high school was the same time I was in high school. We're both about the same age. That was the late 90s. That was the time when investing was getting really exciting again. There was all sorts of dot-com stocks that were going to the moon.
I remember making a lot of money. I remember distinctly in high school, I think it was grade 10, and students kind of chatting with each other because it turned out that a bunch of teachers lost a bunch of money on Bre-X.
Bre-X was in the news. Yep, I heard a lot about that.
And so the implications of all of that certainly came into play in high school. But I remember a few folks, few teachers, I should say, who were impacted by that. And again, it was speculation, but I guess it was shared in class at some point. And then word got around that Mr., so-and-so, no dollar figure, but it was connected to Bre-X, this thing we heard in the news, almost on a daily basis at that time.
Bre-X was kind of the first time I really kind of learned about stocks was Bre-X related, and my dad was an investor in Bre-X as well. Made a bunch of money on it, got most of it out before things got bad. But that was also kind of when I learned about, you can buy, a share of a business, and and I guess if that business grows, that your share grows, and you learn about other things, dividends, etc., whatever. But yeah, I never. I was also very interested in stocks, but never really more beyond just a stock market game. I didn't go much farther. Begged my dad to lend me some money in the late 90s, I think 1999, to put into the booming tech market. I would have lost every penny if he did. Thankfully, he didn't.
Would have been a good lesson early on, right?
Good lesson, yeah. So you had this investing bug, but then you went to university for engineering, right? And started your career as a petroleum engineer. Is that the right
Chemical
term?
engineer. Process engineering, I guess, would have been the first term. So yeah, I mean, again, coming from an immigrant family, like there was not a lot of money. Like my parents did not invest. There was no money to invest, right? It's just like pay for the bills and do this and do that, right? But there was never an account. I never talked about investments with my parents because they didn't themselves. They didn't. And but I do, they had some money saved up from like grant, kids, or they not the Canadian Savings Grant, but the family allowance, the child allowance. I think at the time that they were giving each child. So there was a little bit of money that they would squirrel away, and that effectively would be sort of like what people do now for their RESPs, right? So yeah, I had through the newspaper, through the news and all that, I was voracious reader, still am. And I remember, through a confluence of events, like I chose chemical engineering at the University of Alberta. My number one choice was chemical engineering. My second choice, I think, in grade 11, when I wrote it down for early admissions, was geology. And my third choice was human geography. Engineering was really more of influenced by one of my other close friends who was going into that for sure at UBC, and a family friend who was an engineer who did engineering herself at University of Toronto, and then ended up actually working for Citibank doing other work. But nevertheless, she said that, why do you think about engineering? And not having any engineers in the family, right? I listened to her, the family friend, I listened to my friend, right? And I said, well, why not? They have this amazing concept in this program in engineering called co-op. The co-op program where, they could help you place work for the summer, and you could earn money and experience at that time. And then you could end school with a very low amount of student loans. And what I cottoned onto was actually that I could take that money and go travel. Right, like I'd gone on this high school travel spring break trip to Europe, and gone to Korea a couple times with my sister to go see family, and just travel. Travel. That's what I want to do. I want to go travel. And I guess engineering co-op in particular was the thing for me to go and travel, save up money. And I did. After university, I made it through engineering. There was times when I was going to leave and transfer out. But again, back in grade 12, I thought I can always transfer out. It's easier to transfer out of engineering than it would be to transfer in. And so I somehow made it through the help of friends and classmates and all that. We finished the program, and I got a job. But I knew even back in university, like, oh, maybe I'll do an MBA after school, right? I joined like the stock competition, and that the School of Business at the U of A had, right? I did that in a little bit. So I had written there's a discount for students to do their Canadian securities course. So I actually did my securities course in my last year of university on the side. Yeah,
just before I even did it.
And I was like, okay, because this is something that I'm really interested in. This is, maybe what I want to do. But sure enough, I got a job offer to go up to Fort McMurray, and I went up there. So I started off in process engineering, and after a couple of years, I let it be known to the supervisors and what have you that I kind of really like this side of the business, right? Most engineers, you either go technical, you go in two routes. You go technical, right, full on technical engineering, or you go into more on the business side of things. And I was squarely on the business side of things, right? And so within a couple of years, I was starting to do budgets. I was doing budgets on behalf of the operations team, managers. And then pretty soon that became capital. And then I did the maintenance budgets for the entire business unit. And so then as a full on, business sort of world, right? And then during that time up in Fort McMurray, keenly and specifically, I had some extra money left over from university co-op, and I started investing in university, right? A couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. I remember exactly my very first stock purchase. It was Sobeys at the time. And so I started that investing thing. I remember I was doing transactions in the computer lab in the chemical engineering building, right? Like, it's like, is that safe to do that in a lab, right? I'm like, sure, right? So I was investing in high school, in university, and up in Fort McMurray during the aughts when I was working there, painting a picture again. This is the last major commodity boom, right? Canada put a heavy haul truck on the mall, on the mall in Washington D.C. It was hitting the world like that. This massive reserve in Canada, in northern Alberta, was attracting interest from the United States, from Asia, from overseas, from Europe, and so all those companies are coming in. And there was a land rush, huge. I remember this lease map of northern Alberta, and it's colors everywhere of all these different leases, and it would be UTS, it'd be Deer Creek and Conacher, and all these names, and then Statoil came in, and Shell came in, and all the Asian companies came in, and the American companies came in. There's so many transactions happening, and the research that I was reading at the time was basically about the oil. They had to pick up oil sands coverage all of a sudden because there's all these financial transactions occurring. People wanted to invest in the oil sands.
Back then, those companies still wanted to grow their oil.
Yeah.
They weren't out there publicly saying, "Oh, we're never going to grow our oil."
But again, like
drilling or whatever anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, they were putting land on literally like what they call moose pasture, right? Like stuff that would be generations, like carbonates, like Laricina, and like all these names. Like the farther you moved away geographically, it was just going to be deeper and dirty. Like there was a reason why Syncrude started where they started. There was a reason why GCOS, Great Canadian Oil Sands, started where it started. Access to water, easy to mine. All this other stuff was just like years and years down the road, right? Nevertheless, transactions were happening. And the research that I was reading was essentially written, a lot of it was by conventional analysts analysts that were covering conventional oil and gas, drill a well, put a straw down, pump it up sort of idea. Then they had to learn oil sands, completely different beast. It's a mining world, right? Primarily, and then refinery. Or they were based out of Toronto, they were based out of, maybe a few in Calgary, Boston, New York, right? There's nobody that was really that I could tell, boots on the ground experience in Northern Alberta. And so like, maybe this is how I'm going to parlay my boots on the ground experience with my interest in the financial world and move into something like investment banking or particularly in research. So I actually.
So that's what you were thinking first: investment banking, securities research, not wealth management.
No. Because what did I like to do? I was, engineering. I was reading. I was looking at, I was reading annual reports at the time. I was looking at, filings and stuff, right?
Were you pursuing your CFA at the time too?
So I decided, yes. So I did. I did my level 1 up in Fort McMurray. I completed. I was studying up there. I came down to Calgary to write level 1. I passed level 1. I was writing level 2 afterwards.
Passed it. Wow.
I passed. Yeah, I was writing level 2, and it's okay. So many people fail, right? And so I failed to level 2 the first time, and I was studying for my second go at it when the merger happened between Suncor and Petro-Canada. And then that gave me an opportunity to come down. One of the director I was working for said, I'm moving down to Calgary. There's an opportunity I think you might be interested in. And that was what I was looking for, right? I'm probably not going to spend the rest of my life in Fort McMurray, or at least my working career in Fort Mac. But I'm going to go down to Calgary to the head office, and we're going to work on merger integration. So the next few years afterwards, that's why I said yes, new job, new city, new life, right? All of that. And I put the CFA on the shelf because what I was doing was learning, doing project economics. I was basically doing like in-house MBA work, fixing up, all these models, putting them into PowerPoint presentations, that getting sent off to the management committee or whoever else. And I did that. So afterwards, it ended up being like, I'm in my mid-30s by then. And so then, up until my last role or position at Suncor. So, with a young family, imminently starting, like I was 3 months away, I think, to the start, to the birth of my first son. And I'm like, I'm not going back to research. I'm that desire, that interest to work, 80, 90, 100 hours to work in investment banking. This is not the right time for me. Had I been 10 years younger, had I been 8 years younger, had I still been in my late 20s, I think I would have still pursued that area, that world, right? But no, I was married, right? Son was coming, and I'm like, no, that part of the world is not going to work for me anymore. But where can I parlay this experience? Where can I utilize that interest? I've already had these signals, like I did my securities course. I got my I'd say half, but at least a third of my CFA program done. I can use that as a way to say, hey, this guy knows a couple of things about the finance world. And the thing with engineers is like, we're, stereotypically, there's all these types about engineers, right? But the one thing we do generally have been taught to think about is it's an analytical, process-driven approach, right? Engineering in a lot of worlds, in a lot of other institutions, is called applied science, right? If you can't apply the science to do it economically, you're not going to do it. So there's always an economic portion of engineering, right? Can you do it effectively? Can you lower your costs? Can you wring out of some more production? What can you do to adjust the operations to be more economic? And so it was ingrained on early on. So a lot of the concepts are very similar. Instead of like, tons per hour, barrels per day, right? Or barrel, right? What you're looking at is, and the net present value of this small project, right? You're looking at the NPV of a person's life, or what are the future returns of someone's RSP. So the concepts were very transferable, and the interest was there. So at that time, I was like, well, I don't want to go work back directly in oil and gas anymore. I want off that cyclical train. So what else can I look at? So upon buy-in with my spouse, with my wife at the time, she said, yeah, go do it. Go try it out. She also had a job at the time too, which kind of gave another basis for me to go pursue something new. And I can't tell you like just how important to have support like that. Whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, your significant other, you need a support group in order when you're going to do something almost completely different from what you're doing and starting from zero, right? So, engineers are in a lot of different, professions. A lot of them will learn engineering or go to school in engineering and never, get their stamp, right? And they'll never do what they learned in school. That the engineering, whether it's software engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, chemical engineering, right? A lot of them, especially if you're in Toronto or in a financial place, right? Or you're in an Ivy League or an MIT or something, quite often you'll get picked up by a bank. You'll get picked up by a consulting company, right? McKinsey, Boston Consulting. It's just because you
got some skills that can be transferred to something else, right?
Some analytical stuff. They may not be the most conversant people. Again, I'm talking stereotypes, right? And people tell me that I talk a heck of a lot more than most engineers, but combining all of it, I will give like. There's a lot of paths you can take in life, but the path that's taken me to where I am today. I mean, I can't complain, right?
So
and
it was
it worked out.
So it was circa 2015, I think you started here at CG Wealth, right?
15, 16. So right around 15, that time, 16? Yeah, I got licensed in. I think it was 16. So yeah, it's 8 years now. And yeah, my first son was born in 2014. So it was, and then it was before this birth of my second son. Yeah. So it's been great before that. So yeah. And, analytical, again, the analytical background, an interest in numbers. Again, doesn't matter what number, as long as you can use those numbers effectively to understand the underlying issue, whether it's a plant, whether it's a family, whether it's an individual, right? And then being able to communicate that or, relate that and using the appropriate tools to kind of get to where you want to go. So I've bumped into a few other engineers. More likely, I've seen a couple of engineers that are like portfolio managers of a fund or something of that nature. But there are other engineers that are in wealth management, and right, and they need a career change or what have you.
So probably one other thing that you bring to the position is that you've been through that life as an engineer working for whichever energy companies. You can now position yourself to those people who are presently engineers at Suncor or wherever else, as their pension plans. Like I asked you a question a while back, a few weeks ago, about a particular, I think it was your former employer, about how their group savings plans worked. So you bring that, and you can sort of bring a niche that you understand what their career progression is, what their benefits look like, and bring that to the service you offering in financial planning and wealth management.
I'd like to think so. thanks for bringing that up. I mean, there's some
selling you a little bit there, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's some empathy there, right? Like if you've gone through, and it does not be engineering. There's thousands of positions in any of these companies, and we live in Alberta, you and I, right? Most of the people that we work with also are in this province, and just having some empathy and understanding, like what it's like to go through rationalization of our organization, or understanding intimately, the details. What are the 5 or 6 different options you have in your group plan at work, right? And how does that fit with the other investments and assets that you may have, right? Understanding the compensation structures of those organizations, or even talking about, what are the pros and cons of working with this type of organization with another type of another company in the same world, but maybe smaller, or maybe I'm going to choose to contract out to said company or industry as well. But yeah, having lived in Alberta and Edmonton, and then also in a small town in Fox Creek that is still very busy, in Northwest Alberta drilling, right? And then living in Fort McMurray, literally like living there, right? And then also being in Calgary, I've been able to see a lot of different lifestyles, a lot of different impacts and the benefits and also the cons, and when the price of oil and energy goes down, it really hits people, right? And I myself, you call it a partial response there, but living through it and going through that, seeing a town, the prices of rent going from like 15 to 30,000 for like this 500 square foot place, and then all of a sudden, going back down to less than 1,000, right? Like it's to experience that is something. And having lived in a boom town, and I'll call it a boom town, right? But living in that, that at that time definitely impresses upon oneself, one person on somebody to say like, wow, there were some interesting good things that came out of that, but also there's a lot of lessons to have learned about it. And I do fear, and we've talked about this in the past before, but the concentration, the dependency that our province has on one particular industry. I mean, when it's good, it's really good. Right. But when it goes, or when it's in a downturn, it concerns me, right? To see that, we really talk, you and I always talk about diversification and trying to find ways to find other non-correlated investments. But time and time again, people are going back to the same trough. And at some point, we're going to see another downturn, and you just want to be able to prepare for it. And going through it, I think helps out because you felt it in a lot of different ways, right? So, but yeah, it's been a good basis, right? And I think that's one fascinating thing about the work that you and I do and others, is that we all are a little bit different, right? There's 1,000 other advisors out there. There's 1,000 portfolio managers out there, and not one person's going to fit every single person, as in terms of working together. But there are opportunities where there is a shared experience and something that you can work together and build off of, right? So you can't be one for everybody, and neither can I, but you can be one for some. And I think some of those people like that story and like that experience and work off of that. Whether it's the oil and gas experience, whether it's the Alberta commodity experience, or whether it's just like you yourself having worked in a bank, we talked about National Bank earlier, having seen that, right? Being on that part of the world, that definitely influences how you direct things and how you advise things as well, right?
Yeah. So I was going to say, now there you have it, folks. The origin story of Justin Lee.
Part of it. And, I can talk about a lot more of it, but that's the spine of it, I suppose.
Yeah, I figure we do a couple of episodes where we talk about our origin stories, and I'll do one in a future episode, maybe next time or in a couple of episodes from now. And yeah, I'll share a little bit about that. And my own kind of, I don't have a niche so much as Justin does, but my value add, helping people make sense of their money, comes from both my current career as well as my previous job at a big bank, where I got a bit more of that exposure we don't get directly in this industry, the exposure to personal banking and sales culture, and really how that industry works. So we'll talk about that a bit more in a future week. For
it's
now,
all additive. It's all additive, and that's something I tell people who are going through career transitions. Right? Is that it invigorates you, right, to go and try new things that you may have limited yourself not to or consider. But also, you have to take the experience that you have, because not very few people do the exact same path that you go through or that one goes through in their career. So take what you have and build off of that. So then you can show that experience and show that differentiated view in your new role, in your new position, in your new industry, whatever, right?
You also wouldn't want to discourage someone from taking the same path. Like, I would never discourage someone from getting a job in the bank doing the same thing I did, even though I talk at end about the struggles and how I didn't like some of the things I did there. Yeah. But it still was a good experience that I think anybody in this industry should be exposed to, and it'll make them a better financial planner, a better person because of it. So
I tell one thing. The one thing I'll say, the last, from the moment is I will encourage young people to go out and take that opportunity that is in that frontier town. Like Canada has been built off of the frontier. Beaver pelts, lumber, forestry, cod. There's a host of this world, this country that coal, oil and gas, energy, right? And so the opportunity is there. There's this common experience. And the last time I told you this before, when I was in Fort McMurray, the sheer number of new immigrants and new Canadians that were there working, right? It just, that opportunity exists, right? And so don't be afraid to go to Prince Rupert or Fort McMurray or Grand Prairie or what have you, and work and learn, Prince George, right? Work and learn. And then if you choose to leave, you can choose to leave, right? But I want to say there's something inherently Canadian about working in a frontier town or, in a resource town in particular. And I suppose in 100 years from now, there's still going to be situations like that.
I went to school in Boston, so coming back to Edmonton was going to the frontier again. But I still have yet to this day actually to travel up to Fort Mac. Never been north of Athabasca, I think, in this province. Someday
you have to go. You have to want to be there. It's the end of the road, right? You're not passing. You're not passing through. You are intending on going there, right? Yeah. So, but yes,
let's leave it there. We're kind of close to the hour.
I don't get to talk more about myself. No, next time
if you want to, we'll do part 2, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, we'll do next time. Whenever I do my origin story, you'll have some stuff to add to that as well. We'll do some back and forth.
I am quite curious about some of the things you went through it for sure. Being still kind of ignorant about the finance world in Canada, or having less experience in it than you. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. As always, I really recommend following us on whichever podcast player you're using. Give us a like or a star review or whatever your podcast player does. That really helps us out. Try to get this message out to more people, and of course, any show notes, the summary of this call, this video, or rather this podcast, you will find on muhs.ca/podcast. All right, so long for now.
Go Oilers.